At 27 minutes past 4 on a Monday afternoon, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake tore through Kumamoto in southern Japan and struck the maximum reading on the country's seismic scale. Within minutes, the second floor of a shopping mall had come down with people still inside. A tsunami advisory was racing along the coast, and roughly 300,000 people were being ordered to leave their homes. This is the story of the July 28th Kumamoto earthquake. What it hit, why it hit so hard, and why this exact patch of Japan has been here before. Begin with the moment itself. The earthquake struck at 16:27 local time on the 28th of July, 2026. The Japan Meteorological Agency measured it at magnitude 7.1. The United States Geological Survey initially put it slightly lower at 6.8. Its epicenter sat only about 20 kilometers south of Kumamoto City, and critically, it was shallow, just 10 kilometers below the surface. And in Japan, the number that matters most to the people living through it is not the magnitude. It is the Shindo. Japan measures earthquakes on a scale of felt intensity called Shindo, running from 0 to 7. Shindo 7 is the top of that scale. It is the level at which it becomes impossible to stand, where furniture flies across rooms, and where even earthquake-resistant buildings can be damaged. This earthquake registered a Shindo 7. For the people directly above the epicenter, this was as violent as the ground gets. There is one more thing Shindo 7 sets in motion in Japan, and it is a small mercy the rest of the world rarely appreciates. Japan runs one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems ever built. In the seconds after a fault ruptures, sensors across the country detect the first, faster-moving seismic waves and fire an alert to every phone, every television, and every train in the danger zone before the violent shaking arrives. It is only ever a warning of seconds, sometimes 10, sometimes fewer. But those seconds are enough for a surgeon to lift a scalpel away, for a bullet train to begin braking, and for a child to dive under a desk. When the ground reaches Shindo 7, that handful of seconds is often the difference between an injury and a death. And the first place that violence showed the world what it could do was a shopping mall. In the town of Kashima, in Kumamoto Prefecture, an Aeon Mall, an ordinary busy retail center of the kind found across Japan, was full on a Monday afternoon when the shaking began. The second floor of the building collapsed. According to reports, an explosion was linked to that collapse, and when the dust settled, an unknown number of people were trapped inside the wreckage. Rescue crews rushed to the site to begin pulling people out of a structure that, minutes earlier, had been a normal place to shop. Several other buildings across the region came down as well, but it was the mall, and the people caught inside it, that became the center of this disaster. A shopping mall is one of the most crowded places a Monday afternoon can offer. Families, shop staff, children, elderly shoppers. That is exactly why a collapse there, rather than in an empty office block, turned this from a structural story into a human one, and why rescue crews threw everything they had at the wreckage in Kashima while the aftershocks were still coming. The injured began arriving at hospitals almost immediately. One hospital alone reported more than 50 injuries. In the city of Yatsushiro, a hospital took in around 40 people hurt in the quake. In Kumamoto City itself, another 50 or so were rushed in for treatment. At the time this account was put together, deaths were feared at the collapsed mall but had not yet been confirmed, and rescue teams were still working through the rubble. The full human cost of the Kumamoto earthquake was, in those first hours, still being counted. Then came the second threat, the one that always follows a large, shallow quake near the Japanese coast, the sea. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami advisory for the Ariake and Yatsushiro Seas, along the western coasts of Kumamoto, and for 3 neighboring prefectures. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center flagged that hazardous waves were possible within 300 kilometers of the epicenter. For a nation that lives with the memory of what the ocean did in 2011, a tsunami advisory is not background noise. In March of that year, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake off the northeast coast sent a wall of water inland that killed more than 18,000 people and triggered the Fukushima nuclear disaster. That memory is burned into the national consciousness. It is why, the instant an advisory is issued, coastal towns move without hesitation. It empties coastlines. In this case, the advisory was lifted within about 2 hours once officials had read the sea and confirmed no dangerous wave was building. But for those 2 hours, the coast of Kumamoto held its breath. While the coast watched the water, the rest of the prefecture was moving. Japanese officials instructed roughly 300,000 people across Kumamoto Prefecture to seek shelter at evacuation centers. 300,000. Schools, gymnasiums, and public halls filled with families who had felt their homes lurch beneath them and were not willing to risk going back inside while the aftershocks continued. And they did continue. The main shock was followed by multiple strong aftershocks, each one a fresh jolt through buildings already weakened, each one a reason for the people in those shelters not to go home yet. The disruption spread far beyond the fallen buildings. JR Kyushu, the rail operator for the whole southern island, suspended every one of its lines. That did not just mean the local commuter trains. It meant the Shinkansen, Japan's famous bullet trains, ground to a halt as well. In a country that runs on its railways, shutting down an entire island's network is an enormous decision, and it stranded travelers and cut communities off from one another in an instant. Power failed across parts of the region. Roads cracked, and a modern, wealthy, superbly prepared prefecture was, for a time, brought to a standstill by 10 seconds of shaking. For the people who rely on those trains every day, the shutdown was no minor inconvenience. It was the sudden severing of the arteries of an entire island, one of the fastest and most reliable transport networks in the world, stopped cold in a single instant until every kilometer of track could be checked for damage. So the question that hangs over all of it, why here and why so hard? Part of the answer is the shallowness. An earthquake that ruptures just 10 kilometers down delivers its energy almost straight up into the surface, with very little rock in between to absorb it. That is why a magnitude 7.1, powerful but far from the largest quakes Japan has seen, was able to produce a Shindo 7 and bring down a building. But the deeper answer is written into the ground of Japan itself. Japan sits at one of the most violent tectonic crossroads on the planet, where the Pacific, the Philippine Sea, the Eurasian, and the North American plates all grind against one another. The entire country is built on the seams between these plates. It is the reason Japan experiences a significant share of the world's largest earthquakes. And it is the reason the nation has become, out of sheer necessity, the best prepared country on Earth for them, with strict building codes, instant early warning alerts, and a public that drills for this from childhood. That preparation is very likely why, from a magnitude 7.1 at Shindo 7, the injury numbers were counted in dozens rather than thousands. The buildings that stayed standing are a quiet monument to decades of engineering. And yet, no building code is perfect against a Shindo 7 directly overhead. The collapse in Kashima is a hard reminder that even in the best prepared nation on Earth, a shallow quake of this force will find the weak points. An older structure, a fatigued joint, a section that was never designed to carry this kind of load. Preparation lowers the toll dramatically. It does not erase it. And the danger did not pass when the main shock ended. Every one of the strong aftershocks that followed carried the risk of finishing off a structure the first quake had already cracked. That is precisely why 300,000 people were kept out of their homes and inside the shelters, and why engineers must now inspect building after building before anyone can safely return. In a large earthquake, the hours and days after the shaking can be as deadly as the shaking itself. But Kumamoto, specifically, has a darker history with the ground beneath it. And this is the part that makes this disaster feel less like a random event and more like a recurring nightmare. Because Kumamoto has done this before, in April of 2016, this exact prefecture was struck not once, but twice. First, a magnitude 6.54 shock, and then, 2 days later, a magnitude 7.0 main shock. Around 50 people were killed directly, and the total toll, including deaths in the difficult weeks that followed, climbed past 200. The region's beloved landmark, the 400-year-old Kumamoto Castle, was severely damaged, its stone walls tumbling. The 2016 disaster did more than topple castle walls. It set off massive landslides across the Aso volcanic region, tore apart a major bridge, and forced tens of thousands of people into shelters for weeks. Many of the deaths that came afterward were among evacuees and the elderly, worn down by displacement and the relentless aftershocks. A grim lesson, written in lives, that an earthquake does not end when the ground stops moving. Its second, slower wave of harm plays out over the days and weeks that follow, in the shelters and the hospitals. Go back further, to 1889, and Kumamoto suffered another deadly, historic earthquake in the same region. This is not a place that is unfamiliar with the violence beneath it. It is a place that has learned again and again that the ground here does not stay quiet for long. That is the weight sitting over the 2026 quake. For the people of Kumamoto, this was not a first. It was a return. Many of those crowding into the evacuation centers on Monday night had lived through 2016, had rebuilt once already, and were now watching the walls shake a second time in a single decade. For now, the immediate work goes on. Rescue crews are still searching the collapsed Aeon Mall in Kashima for anyone trapped inside, working carefully through unstable rubble that could shift again with the next tremor. Hospitals across the prefecture are treating the injured. The 300,000 who were told to evacuate wait in shelters for the aftershocks to fade and for engineers to declare their homes safe. And seismologists are watching the readings closely because after a shock this size, on a fault system this active, the next strong aftershock is never far away. For more disaster reports told with the real numbers and the real sources, without the exaggeration, subscribe. And never miss the next one. Because in Kumamoto, the ground has spoken again. A shopping mall that stood in the morning was rubble by the afternoon. A prefecture that rebuilt from 2016 is counting its injured once more. And on an island stitched together from the seams of 4 tectonic plates, The only certainty is that this was not the last time the earth beneath Japan will move.